The Open University has produced a free poster exploring our perfect planet. To order, please call 0300 303 0901 or go to bbc.co.uk/perfectplanet and follow the links to the Open University.